The ice in my glass did not even melt before the room fell dead silent. My general manager had spent 6 months treating me like a ghost. He acted as if I did not exist in the very company my mother died building. But as the ink dried on the legal deed inside my jacket pocket, I realized something wonderful. He had spent the last hour throwing a massive victory party in a building he no longer had any right to stand in. If you have ever had to smile through your teeth while an arrogant tyrant took credit for your hard work, hit that like button, subscribe, and lock in. Because tonight, the quiet guy in the back row stops taking orders. The air in the grand ballroom of the Apex Tower tasted like expensive champagne and cheap arrogance. My name is Julian Vance. I am 33 years old. For the past 3 years, my official title at Vance Sterling Logistics was Senior Project Analyst. My unofficial title, according to our newly appointed Managing Director, Richard Vance, who was my half-brother by my father's second marriage, was simply the charity case. Richard stood near the massive ice sculpture in the center of the hall. His tailored Italian suit was stretched tight across a chest puffed out with unearned pride. He was holding court with 12 of our largest regional investors. His laughter was boisterous, practiced, and entirely hollow. He leaned in closer to them. His voice carried effortlessly over the low hum of the live string quartet. He told them that the absolute secret to turning this firm around was cutting the dead weight. He looked around the room with a smirk. He told them that you have to prune the branches that do not produce any fruit, no matter whose name is written on the trunk. He did not turn his head to look at me when he said it, but he did not need to. Every single person in that crowded room knew exactly who he was talking about. 10 years ago, my mother, Clara Vance, started this company out of a tiny rented garage with just 3 diesel trucks. She took out a line of credit secured against her own small inheritance. She built every single supply line from scratch. She negotiated the original port contracts in the dead of winter. She spent 18-hour days out on the hot asphalt until her heart simply gave out when I was only 22 years old. When my father remarried 2 years later, his new wife brought her son Richard into our family fold. Richard had a polished smile. He had a fancy degree from a private school that his trust fund paid for. He possessed an absolute, ruthless instinct for corporate survival. My father was completely broken by grief and easily swayed by smooth talk. Slowly and quietly, my father handed over the reins of the business to Richard. By the time my father passed away 18 months ago, Richard had managed to restructure the entire board of directors. He diluted my mother's legacy shares through a long series of complex corporate maneuvers. Eventually, he cornered me into a tiny, windowless office in the dark basement, right next to the noisy heating machinery. I stayed in that basement. I did not stay because I was weak or afraid. I stayed because I knew every single brick in the foundation of this company. I knew every hidden account number. I knew every legacy clause. I knew every single legal loop in the commercial deeds my mother had drafted before the company ever went public. Tonight was the grand 25th anniversary gala of Vance Sterling Logistics. I had spent 8 exhausting weeks organizing every detail of the logistics. I secured the exclusive venue. I organized the entire security team. I coordinated with the high-end catering staff. I double-checked the guest list down to the very last name. I was standing quietly near the staff entrance. I was wearing a simple, faded gray suit. I was holding a thick stack of revised vendor paperwork. That was when Richard walked over to me. He was carrying a heavy tray of half-empty champagne flutes that had been left behind by a table of executives. He spoke with a voice dripping with condescending affection. He deliberately raised his tone so the nearby board members could clearly hear every word. He told me that the catering staff was short 3 runners on the east floor. He pointed at the tables and said that the dessert trays needed clearing right away. I looked down at the tray in his hands. Then I looked up into his cold, mocking eyes. I reminded him quietly that clearing tables was not my job because the event staff was managed by an outside venue contractor. Richard smiled a slow, nasty smile. He stepped much closer until the heavy scent of his expensive bourbon hit me in the face. He whispered that everything in this building was my job if he said it was. He reminded me that my mother built a small trucking company, not an empire. He told me to my face that I was living on legacy scraps. He ordered me to take the heavy tray, go clean table 4, and try not to look so miserable in front of the board because I was ruining the visual aesthetic of his party. He did not gently hand me the tray. He deliberately tipped it forward. He let a half glass of spilled luxury champagne splash directly across the front of my clean shoes and the lower hem of my trousers. A couple of junior partners standing nearby snickered quietly into their hands. My pulse hammered once against my ribs like a violent shock. It was hard, hot, and sharp. My hands tightened around my plastic clipboard until the edges cracked under my fingers. I felt a deep burn in the back of my throat. It was that old, familiar rage that used to make me want to scream at the top of my lungs. It was the rage that made me want to break things into pieces. It was the urge to scream and demand why my own father had let these people erase my mother from her own life work. But I did not scream. I did not drop the clipboard onto the floor. I looked down at the dark, wet stains spreading on my shoes. I took a long, slow, deep breath through my nose. Then I looked Richard straight in the center of his eyes. I quietly agreed to handle table 4. Richard repeated the words with a loud chuckle. He patted my shoulder twice with a heavy, patronizing hand. He called me a good boy before turning his back on me and walking away. What Richard never understood about my mother was that she was always remarkably cautious about corporate takeovers. She knew how the business world worked. When she brought my father into the business 30 years ago, she did something very smart. She had her trusted personal attorney draft all the commercial land leases under a separate, obscure holding company named C Clear LLC. Vance Sterling Logistics did not actually own the corporate headquarters building. They did not own the massive distribution hubs. They did not even own the central port terminal located in coastal Georgia. Vance Sterling merely leased those properties on long-term commercial terms. And those exact terms were set to expire at midnight on the very night of this anniversary gala. For 5 long years, while Richard was busy stripping my mother's name off the corporate letterhead, while he was moving her official portrait into the dusty archive storage room, I was living on less than half of my low salary. I was saving every single dollar I made. I was carefully tracking all the complex corporate debt structures. Richard had spent the last 2 years over-leveraging the firm to a dangerous degree. He took out massive, high-interest loans to finance an aggressive expansion into automated freight. That expansion was currently bleeding cash faster than the company could make it. He desperately needed a brand new contract renewal on the corporate headquarters building. He needed it to secure a critical $40 million refinancing package from the primary bank. Without that building lease locked in tight, his entire financial collateral collapsed completely. He simply assumed that the lease renewal was an automatic administrative formality. He thought it was handled by some random property management firm. He did not know the truth. He did not know that 3 months ago, the original founder of C Clear LLC, who was my mother's retired probate lawyer, had quietly transferred 100% of the holding company's voting stock directly into my name. I had not just stood by and watched them take my mother's company away. I had waited patiently. I waited until they built their entire towering empire on top of a hidden trap door. And I was the one holding the rope. I walked back down the stairs to my small basement office at nearly 10 o'clock in the evening. I took off my stained suit jacket. I picked up a fresh linen cloth. I carefully wiped my shoes until they were completely spotless once again. Then, I pulled a heavy leather folio out of my personal wall safe. Inside were 3 critical legal documents. First was the master commercial deed for Apex Tower and its surrounding logistics yard. Second was the formal legal notice of non-renewal for Vance Sterling's primary corporate lease. Third was an immediate eviction and trespass enforcement order. It had been signed by a local magistrate judge earlier that very afternoon. At 10:15, 2 tall men wearing tailored dark suits entered the main lobby. They were not caterers or guests. They were official corporate process servers. They were accompanied by Arthur Hayes, my mother's original legal counsel. He was now silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and as tough as a razor. I met them in the quiet foyer. I put my jacket back on. Together, we walked up the sweeping marble staircase and right back into the roaring ballroom. Richard was standing on the raised stage now, holding a golden microphone in his hand. The room of 300 major stockholders, board members, and prominent city officials had fallen dead quiet to hear his keynote address. He announced to the crowd with a sweeping gesture that they stood tonight on the shoulders of absolute progress. He boasted that Vance Sterling was no longer a small-town haulage business. He claimed it was now the absolute future of global logistics. He declared proudly that with their new credit line finalized tonight, They would secure this very building as their permanent global headquarters for the next quarter century. The entire room erupted into loud, thunderous applause. Richard raised his crystal glass high, basking in the bright spotlight. I began walking straight up the long center aisle. Arthur Hayes and the 2 county marshals walked 3 measured paces right behind me. Richard caught sight of me moving down the red carpet. His heavy eyebrows pulled together in immediate annoyance. He lowered the microphone slightly from his mouth. He asked me what on earth I was doing. He reminded me in a harsh whisper that he had ordered me to stay down on the service floor. I did not stop walking until I reached the very base of the stage. I did not raise my voice at all. I did not need to. The sudden sight of 2 uniformed county deputies stepping onto the stage right behind me caused the loud applause to die out like a blown electrical fuse. The room fell into an uncomfortable, heavy silence. I looked up at him and said very calmly that he was currently speaking on private property. Richard let out a dry, forced, nervous laugh. He glanced down at the senior board members sitting in the front row. He called my behavior ridiculous. He turned toward the event security and asked them to escort me out of the hall because I was supposedly having some kind of mental episode. Arthur Hayes stepped forward onto the platform. He slowly unbuttoned his leather briefcase. He handed a crisp, thick white envelope directly to the chairman of the board. Arthur addressed the chairman in a clear, carrying voice. He suggested that the chairman read page 3 of that holding abstract right now. He advised him to read it before the managing director signed any financial refinancing instruments tonight. The chairman was an elderly man who had known my mother for over 30 years. He frowned deeply and pulled open the folder. His eyes scanned down the first page once, then twice. Gradually, all the color drained from his face until he was entirely pale. He stood up from his table so fast that his heavy wooden chair scraped violently against the floor. He looked at Richard and asked in a panicked whisper what this document meant. Richard snapped angrily at the chairman. He claimed the paperwork was complete nonsense. He stated loudly that I had no legal standing whatsoever because I was merely a low-level analyst. I took a firm step up onto the wooden platform. I explained to the whole room that while I did not own direct shares in the logistics firm because they had unethically diluted my mother's estate, my mother had made sure I owned the very ground standing beneath their feet. I told them that Sea Clear LLC owned the tower. It owned the naval dock terminals. It owned the major freight yards across the state. I stopped and looked down at my wristwatch. I noted clearly that it was now 28 minutes past 10. I continued speaking, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I explained that their master commercial lease was officially set to expire at midnight tonight. As the sole managing director of Sea Clear LLC, I was formally and permanently declining their lease renewal request. Furthermore, due to multiple structural defaults in their financial terms, I was exercising my full legal right to execute an immediate freeze on all corporate assets located inside this premises. The crowded ballroom broke into instant, unmanageable chaos. Senior board members dropped their wine glasses onto the floor. Panicked investors swarmed around the chairman, shouting questions all at once. Richard screamed at the top of his lungs that we could not legally do this. He declared that his firm possessed a legal right of first refusal. His voice cracked into a high-pitched, desperate squeal as he accidentally dropped the golden microphone onto the floor. A loud, piercing screech of audio feedback echoed off the high ceilings. Arthur Hayes interjected calmly into the noise. He reminded Richard that the formal legal notice had been delivered directly to his registered corporate desk 30 days ago. Arthur pointed out that Richard had personally signed the receipt for that package himself. He had simply ignored it because he arrogantly assumed it was just a routine building maintenance invoice. Richard turned his head sharply toward his personal secretary. She was standing near the back exit doors with her mouth wide open in complete terror. Richard's voice changed in an instant. The sharp, arrogant, bullying edge completely vanished from his tone. It was replaced by a frantic, heavy, sweating panic. He took a slow step toward me with his hands raised slightly in the air. He began pleading with me, saying that we were family after all. He rapidly proposed that we sit down together in the private office tomorrow morning. He offered to renegotiate the building lease terms on whatever numbers I wanted. He even promised to grant me an immediate executive seat on the board of directors. I looked down at his expensive, polished leather shoes. Then I raised my eyes and looked straight into his panicked face. I told him very quietly that the catering staff was short 3 runners on the east floor. and I reminded him that he was ruining the aesthetic of the room. The senior county deputy stepped firmly between the two of us. He laid a heavy, gloved hand directly onto Richard's shoulder. The deputy informed him that they held a legal court order for vacant possession effective precisely at midnight. He told Richard that he and his entire board needed to clear their personal belongings out of the building immediately. I did not shout at anyone. I did not raise my fist in anger. I simply stood right in the center of that illuminated stage. I watched silently as the very people who had spent 5 long years treating me like an invisible ghost scrambled around in terror. They stuffed their expensive leather folders into their bags and rushed to clear out of the room before the deputies took action. Richard did not leave the building quietly. He screamed at his corporate lawyers. He threatened to sue everyone in the room. He desperately tried to call my mother's old friends on the board. But those very same friends were already turning their backs on him. They were walking over to my attorney, urgently asking how much the brand new lease rates were going to cost them under my new ownership structure. As the security detail escorted Richard out through the grand double-glass doors of the front lobby, he turned his head back to look at me one final time. His silk tie was completely loose around his neck. His face was pale, slick with cold sweat, and utterly defeated. For the very first time in his entire life, he looked remarkably small, weak, and powerless. I pulled the small white linen napkin out of my jacket pocket. I carefully wiped a tiny remaining drop of spilled champagne off the toe of my shoe. Then I tossed the napkin into the recycling bin sitting near the door. The house did not belong to them anymore. In truth, it never had. People often make the mistake of thinking that revenge has to be about making a massive, dramatic scene. They think it requires screaming, fighting, or throwing wild punches in the dark. But real, true justice is remarkably quiet. Real justice is simply sitting back and letting arrogant people build their towering empires on top of weak foundations they forgot to double-check. And then, when the time is right, you simply step back and let gravity do what gravity does best. If that story hit the right spot for you tonight, smash that like button right now. Let me know down in the comment section below what is the most satisfying moment of quiet payback you have ever witnessed in your own life. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories where the quiet people finally win in the end. Until next time, take care.